program.
Just
That's right.
just sound cap. Just a movie go.
All right. Yeah.
Test one.
Right. Let me know when everybody's ready. Okay, I'd like to call to order this annexation workshop, April 15th, 2026. Exciting topic that has a lot of nuance and details to it. So, council felt we needed some extra workshops and we want to do this right. So here we are, and Scott's going to walk us through it. So over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, good afternoon, I guess. Council, thanks for being here today. Thanks for the public showing up in support of this, or hopefully in support of it, but to listen in today as we conduct this workshop. Thank you for providing this extended opportunity to talk about the subject that requires probably more time than a typical workshop. So thank you very much for that, this opportunity to talk a little more detailed. Along with me today, as obviously City Manager, I think on the line, or will be on the line soon, is Melissa Ryan, our contract attorney, that's been working on, that can't hear me right now. She apparently can't hear anything. I just got a note, might be experiencing some difficulties on the Zoom end of people being able to hear, which could be an issue, given that we were hoping that she could participate today.
I'm here. I just needed to be promoted as a panelist. Otherwise, I was just watching.
Can you hear us okay?
Sure can.
Could we get a little more volume in the room, though?
Can you hear me?
Yep, got you now. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Missy? Okay. So Melissa Ryan, goes by Missy, has been helping us out with the UGB adoption, is here for as a resource for questions that I might not be able to answer that she could answer better. So feel free to ask her questions, and feel free, Missy, to jump in on anything that you would like to provide input on. So looking at the agenda for today, and I apologize that this PowerPoint is not on full screen, but it's there's good reasons for that. So today, what we want to do is kind of recap what the project goal is, and that project goal is first and foremost to update the city's annexation ordinance to prepare for possible annexation petitions upon adoption of our urban growth boundary expansion. The current ordinance is not satisfactory to meet the needs or to request out of future development what the city would like to see. So that's why we're doing this. We've held several workshops with the council so far, 2 workshops. One was kind of an annexation 101, and the second one was reviewing some examples of other communities' ordinances to get an idea of what other communities do and what are elements of an annexation ordinance. We also looked at specifically Ashland's annexation ordinance for their affordable housing requirements. And based on that and based on the discussion we had, council directed staff to take the next step and to put it into a draft format. It doesn't mean it's ready for adoption, but it's easier to maybe review in that format where where it's actually code language. So that's what we've done. It's obviously still needs a lot of work, and it's not intended to be adoption ready yet, and that's why we're going to go through these workshops. So to that point, there will be more workshops after this, and we will also be involving the Planning Commission. As we know, it's a development code amendment now, not a municipal code, and so we're going to have to bring them up to speed. And we have a workshop with them tomorrow that I plan to. Yeah. Not you guys. You guys don't have to come. So trying to get the Planning Commission up to speed. They're behind you guys. So the idea is that we can get them up to speed so that when we have the joint meeting on May 7th, there will be an ability to have a further discussion and get on hopefully the same page and hear what the Planning Commission has to say about it. And then there will be some additional workshop opportunities. And then if it all goes well, hope to get it through the adoption process to get it adopted by council potentially in July or the first meeting in August, if everything goes smoothly. If that's kind of the best case scenario. The idea obviously is to get something in place before the UGB is formally adopted. And it's not formally adopted locally. I mean, we'll adopt it locally, but it'll still have to go after that to the state for their acknowledgement, and that could take several months or more. So we do have a little bit of time to get this done, but we see the urgency of getting it done. So the bulk of the day today was really anticipated to spend the time necessary. We got 2 hours if we need it. If we don't need it, we can certainly stop earlier, but to go line by line, so to speak, and see what questions the council has and understanding it and then direction for potential changes. So that's the idea. It's interactive. It's stop me at any time with questions. So any questions on any of that before we go forward?
No, I just want to note that I left my notes at home, so I'm going to pull it up on my phone, but I'm not texting anybody or
Oh, sure.
whatever. So just apologies for that. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
Do you want a printed version?
Okay, so we'll jump into it. In order to be able to help kind of evaluate the annexation ordinance, I think it's helpful to understand kind of how the process works from a UGB adoption to actually a developer starting to move dirt and building out in these areas. Obviously, we're still going through the UGB adoption period right now, soon to be done. And we'll, soon on the heels of that adoption, we'll be starting the public portion of the area plan.
I'm having trouble reading the 5 boxes across the bottom.
Yeah, that one's especially small.
Light off without turning off the rest of them. Does that one bank go off?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I wasn't, because I had good reason for that, but I'll wing it. So is that better?
Yeah,
A little bit better.
Well, if we
Still,
get that one bank of lights off, then I think
I promise these are the smallest lettering.
now I can read it.
There you go.
Lots of people in the back don't fall asleep.
So the area plan is something that we can't start on until the UGB is adopted. So we need to know that we have a boundary in place that we can start planning for. So it doesn't make sense to start that before the UGB is adopted. Although there are some things that we can do behind the scenes to start getting that going so that once it is adopted, we can really hit the ground running with the public part of that process.
Is that adopted by the city and county or the whole way by the state?
The area plan?
Yeah.
The area plan is just a local adoption.
Oh, it can be done after the local adoption.
We could, I mean, the safest thing to do, I think, is to wait for acknowledgement, I guess,
Okay.
from the state.
All right. Thank you.
But like I said, there's some things we can do to get going with the consultants before we hit the public part of it. And not hit the public part of it until we know that our UGB is a firm go. So area plans are that but where we're going to basically take that boundary right now with the UGB adoption that just shows what the boundary is, but nothing else, and taking that area plan and starting to kind of flesh it out with basic, larger collector arterial road corridors in general, where apply comprehensive plan designations to the property so that we know how much of commercial, we know how many acres of commercial we need. We know some of it's industrial, some of it's commercial retail. And so we have to apply proper land use designations to those. They're very similar to zoning designations, but they're not quite. They're a little bit different terminology, but they help inform future zoning. And so you will have a comprehensive plan designation. It'll look like a zoning map up on our area plan, but it'll be comprehensive plan designations that will guide future development. So in other words, annexer, property owner wants to come forward and annex. The expectation from the city is that their zone districts are on alignment with what our comprehensive plan designations are, so that it's not just waiting for them to propose something, that we have some guidance there that we're offering to them, and creates the expectation of what we're going to get. Make sure that we're getting all the different types of land uses that we need. That's very important because we need a certain minimum amount of acreage for high density residential, minimum acreage of low density residential, employments, parks. So we need to, through our comprehensive plan designations, we'll be able to ensure that those are in turn implemented into master plans that developers do.
When you're doing street layout, et cetera, in your area planning, again, rough street layout, is there going to be an opportunity, given that the bulk of AA is untreed, to ensure that street layout takes maximum advantage of solar as we look for these houses that are going to be occupied for the next whatever years, and given that electrical energy is going up and we're in a beautiful solar area, I hate to see all the houses oriented such that they couldn't take advantage of it, i.e. north-south rather than east-west, sort of an orientation with streets. Is that something we have the ability to do in that process?
Yeah, that would be, I think those would be like a set of policy statements that would be included in the plan that would be call for us to update our code so that would be a requirement for actual development. We wouldn't be getting into that level of specificity with the area plan.
Right.
It would be really like, we're talking more like if we're going to be doing this arterial connection from Barclay down to 126, where's that generally going to go? Maybe a collector or two street off of there that are important connections up to Barclay or something like that. But we're not getting down to the level of where are all the local streets going and what's their orientation.
So that would fall more to the right-hand side of
Correct.
the 5 boxes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to fire the shot across the bow.
So, when we do an area plan, it's kind of prescriptive, and just curious, and obviously it's legal because other people have done it, but is there any recourse from landowners if they don't like what's been laid out across their acreage? I mean, I'm just curious how that works because we're pretty much saying either this or nothing.
Sure.
So,
It's a good question. There's other communities that I know, if they have a developer that's ready to go, they'll actually work with, they'll be part of that process. Obviously, we don't want to create a plan that doesn't work for any developer because that doesn't meet our community goals. But it's also got to, it's kind of got to be a balance between what's feasible for development and what's good for the community. So the more input that that we can get from those property owners, and oftentimes those property owners aren't the ones that are going to develop. It's going to be, they're going to sell the property to somebody who is a developer who can pull these things off. I mean, there's probably some exceptions to that rule, but it's rarely, in my experience, the property owner today is not the person that's bringing forward the development later. And it's a public process. We plan to have a community advisory committee that would probably involve some property owners out there so that they have some input into this. So, does that help? Okay. And so that area plan will, again, be kind of this high level, I call it a higher level master plan. Yeah, but it will have direction. It'll provide direction to future developers. It'll provide some direction to the city staff to potentially process code amendments to help accommodate the type of development that we're talking about. Sometimes the vision out there doesn't line up with what our code can accommodate. And sometimes I've also seen where, master plan developers actually create their own code language. So we'd have a zone district that is just applicable to an area out there that we would actually, assuming we're comfortable with it, adopt it. It would just apply to that area that would help accommodate it. Like if it had different setbacks or, maybe more different type of housing types than we currently allow in our residential or multifamily residential, that might be a solution, that have them just put forward something and then we review it and adopt it.
I think given the history that we've had with allowing non-conforming streets and stuff to be put into developments in certain areas in order to make the developments work, I'd like to see us try not to do that in this part of town. It's we've had, I think, some what's the word I want to use? I think
Substandard.
yes, and we've had some friction between neighbors who live in an area where the streets are, quote, private because they're not built to city standards, and others who live nearby who use that area to commute back and forth to where they're going, creating friction between those groups. I'd like to avoid that if we can.
I think we've updated our street profiles. I think we don't.
Yeah, I don't think we're accepting private streets, substandard streets anymore. We have some alternative street standards that Public Works is okay with, but yeah, we don't. I don't think we're entertaining private streets anymore like that.
Just for a reference, are you talking about something like tourist commercial? Like, I mean, it's not like the same code, but it's just a very small piece of land that has its own code, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for instance, right now, Pine Meadow Village has its own set of standards. So that could be an example of what we could possibly do out there. But we wouldn't get to that definition with the area plan. It would just be a policy of we got the vision, we established the vision through the area plan. Here's a bunch of things we need to do to make it happen. And that's kind of future work, that kind of action items. So it doesn't stop with the area plan. That just creates more work, but important work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on the area plan in terms of what it kind of accomplishes? So once you get that adopted, then we can start entertaining annexations. We really need to have that in place before annexations as well. What we typically in the past have seen is that we'll have a property owner come forward or a developer that's interested in doing something, and that will start a negotiation of the terms of the annexation agreement. That basically is something that usually negotiated between staff and the developer and approved by council if they're comfortable with it. And that kind of lays out the steps for what the expectation is when they come in for actual annexation. It's kind of a pre-annexation agreement. It's still important, but maybe less important now because we are so detailed in our requirements in our annexation ordinance. It used to be, before you had really good criteria, at least in my experience again, I'm only drawing on my experience, it was more wide open in terms of what you wanted and what you asked for. Park, schools, art, kind of those kinds of things. It's this negotiation that goes back and forth. I think a lot of communities are trying to get away from that by being more specific in terms of what they require. And that, I think, is evident in our approval criteria that we have that I've shown in our draft ordinance. So I think it's still important to have an annexation agreement, but maybe it's a little less important than it used to be. And that's something we can continue to flesh out over time. But then after that, then the actual petition for annexation would be submitted, which is a process guided by state statute largely, kind of talking about what percentage of property owners or electors that you have to be able to submit something like that. It's in our code as well, but it's guided by statute. And then along with your annexation, the idea would be that you would have to submit a master plan and your request for initial zoning. And so that master plan and zoning request would go to the Planning Commission, maybe a submittal, an application that would go to staff. Staff would make a recommendation, go to Planning Commission, they'd make their recommendation on the master plan, and then both the master plan and the annexation would go to council, and you would be the final approving body of that. So you'd approve the annexation and the master plan and the initial zoning in the same night, theoretically. You can also, if a developer's ready, they could also add subdivision and site plan review, those other approvals that they will need to develop. It doesn't have to be a subsequent step. They could, if they're ready, they could wrap it all up into that one annexation, master plan, subdivision, everything they basically need kind of hearing. But if they're not ready to have that level of detail, they could put those future applications off to the future. Does that make sense? Sort of. Every time it gets a little more clear, maybe. Okay.
Scott?
Yes.
Very briefly, can you explain what an elector is?
Basically, anybody who's legally entitled to vote in a community.
Okay. Oh,
So it's an actual voter, a registered voter.
It's still unclear to me. I had the same question. Elector versus property owner. I was thinking maybe if a corporation owns the property, then there's a board, I don't know. But do you have any other some kind of examples of?
That's
Yeah.
where it gets a little out of my wheelhouse
Okay.
quickly on this. I don't know, Missy, if you, feel free to jump in if you have any input at all, but
Yeah, would that include renters?
if you're a voter, if you're a legally registered voter, Missy, do you have anything you want to share on this?
Yeah, so the context of the question, I had a little bit of a hard time tracking why the issue of who is an elector is coming up. And also, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So this is coming up in the context of that annexations really no longer can go to the voters.
I think it was who could initiate an annexation. They were asking questions about what electors mean in that context.
Yeah, sorry, we jumped ahead a little bit.
Okay. So electors, yes, typically means a voter. And so who can initiate an annexation it's really up to the city. It can be the property owner, which is who it typically is, or the agent of the property owner. I guess that's what you're asking. If you're looking at a specific section of the annexation ordinance, I have that in front of me and I can zero in on that. The proposed annexation ordinance.
Councillor McDougall, do you want to hold till we get to that section and we'll?
sure. I thought we were talking about initiating an,
I had made a
Annexation.
reference to it, but
oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
section in the code.
So you're talking about 410, 400.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I was so excited.
Yes. So this is the language that Scott has put in this draft ordinance is directly out of the statute. And so an owner of land can be an LLC or a corporation in subsection 1. A majority of the electors registered does refer to registered voters. So yes, it could be somebody who's renting and, they're registered in the territory. If that makes sense. So when it talks about electors, it's talking about voters, and when it's talking about owners, it's talking about any owner of property, no matter how they hold title, if it's individually or in a trust or an LLC.
And so in the context, and we'll get there in a bit, but in the context of that section, there are 3 different methodologies that are presented, one with owners, one with electors. And I had some questions too, but I think I'd like to defer to get there.
Yeah, this is one of the most complicated areas of annexation law, which is also a complicated area in and of itself. So it's not surprising that you have questions.
Okay, yeah, let's keep, or did you have a question?
No, I'm fine with that, because
Circle
that
back
is
to
that section, I have a lot of questions.
Okay, well, we'll get to that here in a minute. Before I get off on the development process, I think it lays good context to the discussion here. If you have any questions, I want to circle back to it, let me know. Here we'll jump into the actual draft ordinance. And just to kind of let you know where we're proposing that it reside in the code, here is on the table or the column in the middle there is the municipal code and all the different titles that comprise the municipal code. You can see all the way down at the bottom is Title 16 Development Code. So it would be a component of the municipal code, but it's actually in our development code. And the thinking here is that it would be in our Chapter 4 Applications and Review Procedures. Where you have types of applications, site plan review, blah, 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 all the way down to Chapter 4.9. So thinking is that this would be a new Chapter 4.10. So with every section of a code, we typically like to have a purpose section that outlines what the section of the code really is trying to accomplish. And this one is simply just, the purpose of this chapter is to establish procedures and criteria for annexation under the provisions of the Oregon Revised Statutes, including but not limited to ORS Chapter 222. This chapter is intended to achieve orderly and efficient annexation of land into the city that will result in providing a complete range of public services and public facilities for the annexed territory and to implement the Sisters Comprehensive Plan. So, pretty overarching and basic there. And then it jumps into applicability. What properties can petition to be annexed? It says to be eligible to annex, the land to be annexed must be located within the Sisters urban growth boundary. So in this case, the area in blue, once adopted, and contiguous to the existing city limits, or separated from the existing city limits only by a public right-of-way, stream, or another body of water. So not all the land in the UGB, if brought in this format, would be immediately eligible to annex.
Okay, so if you have 5 property owners that all their properties touch each other, but only one of those properties are contiguous to city limits, can they all be annexed together, or do we have to do one at a time because of that requirement? It has to be touching city limits.
So if there are 5 property owners brought in under the same applicant?
Yes, can they do that?
My understanding is that is possible. There may be a
Yes.
sequencing, and Missy, weigh in if you want, that there may be a little sequencing that, that may be done at the same time, but the first one needs to actually technically be done first or recorded or approved for annexation. Could be done this theoretically, I think, the same night. It's just maybe a sequencing issue. Missy, anything else to offer on that?
Yes, thanks. If all property owners join together in the same application, that would be the cleanest way to do it. And then there's not really a sequencing problem, because even though it's 5 properties in this hypothetical, it's one space that's connected to a road or to the city.
Okay.
Converse question of that is then, if you have those 5 contiguous properties again, and someone in the middle is reluctant to commit at this time, it would mean properties not contiguous to the one, let's say there are 5 spaces. 1, 2 come in, 3 doesn't want to come in, 4 and 5 want to come in, but they can't, they're now islands, so they can't come in until 4 is.
That's correct.
Convinced, okay. That's what I thought, but I just wanted clarity on that.
I mean, I think the overarching concept is that annexation is always mostly voluntary, except for, health hazards. So it is a iterative process, and it is voluntary, and it's the landowner that it basically figures this all out.
Any other questions on this section before we move on? Okay. So in order to have an application process, you have to have procedures to review it by, and this says that the annexations shall be used a type 3 or type 4 process. I think I've gotten some feedback, legal feedback, that most of these would be, type 4 is more of a legislative review process. The type 3 is more of a quasi-judicial, site-specific. Because these are more site-specific parcels, they would probably be processed under a type 3 permit, is way other communities do it, but with city council review. Our type 3 applications typically, or now, stop at the planning commission, but we'd have to amend the code to make sure type 3 applications under this scenario would actually go to council. And that the annexation is not subject to the 120-day review timeline that other applications are in Oregon are required to comply with. We try to do it in a timely manner, but we wouldn't be necessarily subjected to that timeline.
So what does that mean?
It means we could take longer if we need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought you were saying, but I
Yeah.
wanted to be sure.
Yep. So in 2, it talks about a master plan approval required concurrent with annexation, unless it meets some exemptions that we'll go over in a second here. The applicant can also submit for other application land use approvals at the same time as the master plan, but the master plan is the one that we absolutely need to have. And so here's some areas that the draft proposes that are exempt from master plan approval. And the thinking here is that the master plan process wouldn't really create any value or do much service for these kinds of annexations. And one is for a school on a lot smaller than 20 acres. We have, if you recall, a land set aside for an elementary school for 15 acres. So we wouldn't, because they would sort of know how to develop their own sites, and there wouldn't be any benefit to master plan in this context. The suggestion here is that public schools are exempt from the master plan requirement. Also potentially exempt are city-initiated annexations intended for such uses as public facilities or publicly owned right-of-ways. I can't envision too many different scenarios that the city would utilize that, but this was drawn from an example from another community, so at least that community thought it was necessary to have this in there.
Would it perhaps an instance of where that might apply would be as the things are plotted out, it becomes clear that there needs to be some sort of a, it's not a right-of-way for utilities, but some sort of an easement related to access for utilities, water, sewer, power, those sorts of things that might potentially bisect some piece of property.
That's a good point. And one large one that just came to mind as you were talking was, say we need this arterial to eventually connect through to 126, and those property owners aren't ready to go, and it's holding up other development. That could be an example of where we would potentially maybe utilize this, I would think, is to go get the right-of-way for that ahead of time. It's one idea. We'll have to research, what applications that's intended for a little bit more, but those are 2 that come to mind.
I have a question about this section. The one thing I don't see on here is a landowner that may be adjacent, congruous to city limits, that wants to come in but doesn't want to actually develop anything. They just want to come in. What's the procedure for that? It seems like a master plan approval would not be necessary for that because they're not actually developing anything. They're just wanting to come within the city. So does that apply here? What would the review process look like for that?
So that's a policy decision I guess the council needs to decide on. The general thinking is that the city would only want to annex something if it was meeting one of our goals. and then they demonstrated that by the development. You know, so I think that meets the city goals of, we're going to provide city services to you and all that. What's the benefit to the city? I guess is
Right. I think a lot of people wouldn't mind joining the city, but they just don't know exactly how or when they're going to develop. And I think that we need to have a path for those types of people, because if we're asking them to be property owner initiated outside the city limits to come into annex, it sounds like we're telling them that they have to develop or they're not allowed in. That sounds a little coarse, to be honest.
Actually, I think that is part of the point. Is that if it might sound coarse, but if people joining the city aren't wanting to further the city goals, then why would they not just stay in the county and exist as is? I'm curious, honestly.
One of the reasons is because congruous land, we need to have them come in first because the land behind them can't in a lot of manners. So I think we want to encourage people to come in, whether they're going to actually develop or not. To be honest with you, if they use city services, that's okay, because that means we're extending city services one more lot out. And eventually, we want it to be in the whole UGB at some point, and you can't do that unless you incentivize somehow people coming in, whether they're going to develop right away or not. If it's citizen initiated, I think we should be as receptive as possible, is my thought. So and I'm asking because I don't see it here. That's the only reason I'm asking. What's the review process for one piece of 5 acres that they don't really want to do anything, but they know it'll be helpful to the city by moving the line of congruous property, contiguous,
Well,
properties.
and I felt like there was something in here, but maybe I imagined that, so.
Maybe it was a
nobody's-
whole other.
Maybe, okay.
I think there's some
Yeah, because there's-
exemptions for whether a property needed to master plan or not.
Right.
Maybe
But I don't think there's any,
Because it's a question, it's not a, I'm not.
I think it's a good point in that both you have good points. I think that we want to bring as much buildable land in as we can, but we may also have somebody who isn't really sure, either they haven't found a development partner, they're wanting to sit on it a little bit longer and kind of see how things around them develop, but they want to come into the city maybe because they've got a failing septic system or something along that line, looking for water. I think that if we look to the west end of town, we have some examples of land that came in several years before it was ever developed.
Woodlands.
Woodlands is an example, and as is, frankly, the Sunset Meadows area and those things. So whether they were zoned wrong or not is another question, but I think that you raise a good point. I think we need to just discuss that in more detail as we get down that pike as to what would that look like and how would we want to do it to ensure that we encourage land to come in for development, but that we also don't discourage individuals who aren't quite there yet, but want to be part of that contiguous block.
Yeah, Scott, can you give an idea as to whether we need to work that out as part of this ordinance? Because that's definitely something I want to dig into together.
Yeah, I raised the question. Do we need,
No,
do
that's
we,
fine.
do we need a review for citizen-initiated properties that are right next to us?
Yeah,
Maybe it's only a sentence. I
I've
don't know.
never, yeah, it's a good question and something to research a little more. Missy, I don't know if you have anything you want to offer on a concept like that. I don't think it's contemplated in this ordinance, so that's probably why you didn't see it.
Yeah, it's this is really a policy decision by the council as to what they want to allow. I guess the thing to remember is that the city council should retain a lot of discretion about whether to allow land to be brought into the city. So if there is a proposal, this is a great example of a property that wants to come in to provide contiguity perhaps to its neighbor, but they're not ready to master plan, they're not ready to specify the development. the city council should be able to weigh the value and the benefit to the city in allowing that versus requiring or allocating limited city resources first to focusing on land that wants to come in that also wants to be developed to provide needed commercial, needed housing, things like that. Because what this really comes down to is an allocation of resources because annexations do take up a lot of staff time and city time. And so the council might decide, well, we have 5 annexation applications and 4 of them are with master plans that are ready to go, and this 5th one just sort of wants to come in but doesn't really have a plan, so we're not going to approve that one right now. That's just an example of that, but it's perfectly fine to have the option as long as the ordinance is revised to include a lot of discretion to the city whether to reject an annexation petition that doesn't include a development plan. And I hope that makes some sense.
So I could see, I'm not the wordsmith, I'm just thinking in my mind then, there would be some language that would say at discretion of the council, land may be blah, 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 annexed in, and that would be, there would be some clear guidelines as a council to what they would look at during that process. But something in this particular annexation policy that would be what I would call the waffle language.
Yes, and I think the thing to pay attention to there is that what is as I understand Scott's preview, there is going to be a comprehensive plan designation for all of the new land that's included in the UGB. There's going to be a city comp plan designation, but not necessarily a city zoning designation. And so one factor might be, what is the comp plan designation for this property that wants to come in but with no development plan? Is it a comp plan designation that is high on the city's priority list of the kind of development that it needs to see? That could be one factor. The other factor might be, is it a piece that's needed to construct an important piece of public infrastructure, like, run a sewer line or run an arterial?
In the case that you would, the council decides it's worth to annex a 5-acre site or something in order to facilitate the annexation of other property that would be master planning, would the area plan still apply to those 5 acres after they're annexed?
I guess you would.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of does the area plan only apply to the areas to be annexed, or it's retroactive even if it's within the city limits, the area plan? Like, say the area planning process we undergo now would incorporate existing city property within city limits. So any master plan or any development plan would be subject to that area plan.
Right.
When they were, okay, so this piece of land that's not being developed at that time, I guess what happens in my brain is that they get a city zoning designation. And so even if they're not acting on it then, based on what they were in the area plan, if they were, commercial, then they'd get a commercial designation. So when they did decide to develop, that it would have to be that. I mean, that I make up these things until they happen and I know it's true. So is that accurate?
Yeah, it sounds accurate. It's a scenario that I haven't come across before, so I think there's more research needed on it. It's an interesting point, but the other question comes up in my mind is if you don't, like the affordable housing requirements, if you don't apply them at annexation, you can't apply them later potentially. So there's some good more research necessary on that idea.
Yeah, and I think it really applies to not just the review procedures, it kind of applies to the initiation procedures and all of them, just to remember that, the smallest minority is the individual. I mean, that's like, and not always is everybody ready to go or whatever, but they might be right in a good place that's blocking everybody else, and they might want to come in under just some goodwill and say, hey, I want to come in so the guy next to me can come in, or the next 5 properties can come in. And I think we just have to to think about that throughout this whole process, and it's not like a whole section of new stuff. I think it's just something that we have to put a sentence here and there just to
Yeah, it's
protect
interesting. It
individual
could
people.
get complicated, you know, if they're in the city, then you can't be on septic anymore yet, and well, you'd have to provide city services. So there's a big cost that you're going to incur to do that. Probably, my hunch is that if you have to do that, it probably won't happen, because it'd only happen if you had a development ready to go to help finance those big capital
But
improvements.
some people might just be thinking about resale, and coming into the city might create more value for their property just because it's in, and then they can sell it, and
There's
then
no
it
doubt
will
about that.
develop. But, so we just have to think about that.
Yeah,
At
okay.
the bare minimum, we don't want to get in our own way.
That's correct.
But I
Yeah.
think you made an important comment that I hadn't really thought about, and that's true, is that should something like this occur, we would have to still apply the annexation criteria. So if it's designated residential and it's going to be used for residential housing, then some of the language that we're going to talk about later on this afternoon, would have to be applied at the time it's annexed in, and put it as an override on that piece of property, so that when it is sold or developed, it's subject to what we want to see related to affordable housing and things like that. That's what I heard you say, and I appreciate you saying that.
Okay, thanks.
Anyway, I didn't mean to bog us down.
You didn't. That's what I'm here for.
No, I think it's a
Get
good,
that policy question in there.
yeah, it's a good point. We need to be looking at all the different case scenarios that could be hitting this code. And it's a really important one.
We have to at least try.
Last thing I want to do is be sitting here at some point in time, or sitting in that audience of non-council at some point in time, listening to an annexation process go through and realize that we left a big hole somewhere. Someone just drove a truck through it.
Yeah.
All right, good discussion. Just continuing on, I don't think we touched on 3C there, but something else that could be exempt from master plan approval is a city-initiated annexation for housing as part of a program authored by state statute. There have been some legislative UGB amendments for pilot programs for affordable housing that have been approved. There's one in Redmond. Bend has at least one or two, and I believe that's why this provision is in there, is for those particular developments that are authorized by some state legislation. And then just a note, this language is kind of clunky. I think we need to clean it up, but that there could be final procedural steps and decision issuance for development applications that occur after the ordinance becomes effective, especially if, they're not proposing site plan or subdivision approval, things of that nature that could happen after annexation becomes effective. Okay, so that brings us back to the initiation procedures. Here they are up on the screen. One of these three has to be able to be met to initiate a petition.
Can I interrupt for one second? Is this from state statute?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you want me to go into read through those different scenarios, or if you have specific questions that you want to.
It would help me if, and I won't hold you to it being totally in plain English, but if you could explain each of the three in plain English. I wrote on the side of mine, English, please, because I read it through 4 times and I got as confused as probably anybody else in reading it. And I want to be sure I understand. I mean, some of it's clear, but, electors residing in the territory, this is wonderful state of Oregon language, and we have the 2 people in the room right now, yourself and Missy up on the screen, who can probably put this into just some layman terms for me.
I wish that was true, but I've told Scott that annexations are like a big flaw in my knowledge, and there are many more people in the state who can better explain this, but I think maybe you've heard these terms double majority and triple majority annexations, and that is essentially this. So number one is the double majority. It's a hybrid of the double majority. It's all the owners of land. So let's say we have one piece of property and it's owned by an LLC, and not less than 50% of the electors, and this is the key, if any, residing in the territory, consent in writing. So basically, this LLC owns a piece of land. there are no electors residing. It's a vacant piece of land. There aren't any electors residing in the territory. They will be able to petition to be annexed. The majority of the electors, number two is what is more commonly referred to as the double majority, and that is the majority of the electors registered in the vacant piece of land, which is, maybe it's got one house on it and there are two people living in the house and one of them is signs the petition, and the owners of more than half of the land in that territory consent in writing. So that's your double majority. And then the third one is a different kind of double majority. So I would like to be able to answer your question in plain English, but I think I could do that better if I followed up with a written, one pager that goes through and explains each of these. I think the important point here is that your planning staff is going to know when a petition for annexation comes in if it satisfies the requirements. Because we're going to have a checklist and we're going to go through the checklist and say, okay, does this satisfy and does this satisfy? And typically the person who's coming in to annex, these are sophisticated proposals. And so they have sophistication and sophisticated consultants helping them put together an annexation proposal.
Since I asked the question, I'm just speaking for myself, but I wouldn't mind seeing something written, like a one-pager down the line. Doesn't have to be
Yes.
today. You can even consult with one of those folks that knows more than you do.
Yes,
Try to-
you bet.
But it's when you read it, and it gets confusing very fast.
Yes. It's ridiculous.
Thank you.
It is.
I think it is too, but to have an understanding in my own mind as a representative of the city, of the citizens of the city, should I get asked a question, if I start sprouting, well, if more than half the owners of the contiguous territory propose to be annexed and more than half the land in the, someone's going to either run over me with a truck or just shove me out the door.
It reads like AI.
Yes, it does.
I mean, which is,
Delightful.
Well, it might be helpful to know kind of a little background of how these statutes. So this language kind of got enacted by the legislature to get around the requirement of having to have a vote, having an annexation put to a vote. This is separate from the big Corvallis case that you've already heard about in a prior workshop. And so when the legislature was trying to write these statutes to get around the voter requirement and just allow annexation through a public hearing, I think it's fair to say that they didn't want to announce to the world that that's what they were trying to do. And I believe that's why this language came out looking the way that it did. It came out of the legislature as an attempt to get around referral of annexations to the voters.
So voters meaning putting it on a ballot, right? For
Yep.
all registered voters in the
That's
area.
right. Yes,
So-
because that's in past, all annexations had to go, this is 20 years ago or so, had to go to the voters.
we have an annexed land in the city that didn't have a vote. It's in our
Right.
charter still, but
Right.
it's been invalidated by legislation.
Exactly. It's been by the Court of Appeals, correct.
So this is new territory for our city.
Exactly, yeah.
So that kind of takes us back to the term elector, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking about registered voters that
Mhm.
would have voted if this annexation had gone to ballot? Or are we talking about something else in this section?
Well, you're talking about the electors only in the territory that's proposed to be annexed. So not in the whole city. It's just if you have two pieces of property, you're talking about a majority of electors registered in those two pieces of property.
And they
That's
would,
why it's so ridiculous.
they would be registered in the county because they're not citizens of the city at this point in time. So they wouldn't have voted in city elections. They would be voting in county and statewide elections.
Yeah, that's true.
If they live there, I'd assume their voting address would be that piece of property.
I always like kind of case scenarios, if they could be laid out. I kind of tried to do that a bit on the back of a blank paper, to just say, okay, I've got 5 properties coming in. I've got this has 2 property owners. This one has 3. This one, and then just bounce it against this. It's just so much helpful for me. And I got hung up on the elector part of it, just like Councilor McDougall. It just doesn't make sense to me. If it doesn't make sense to me now, I don't think it's going to make sense later. I don't know if maybe this code is going to have definitions up front, like a lot of code does, where we will define the word elector. That might be helpful, depending on the definition.
There's people who come in and fix your power,
Yeah. And then on that same item number 1, it says residing in the territory. That's very vague to me. Do they have to be living there as their primary residence? They have to be physically there. They have, how, I just think that's pretty vague. It might hang us up.
I was going to say, and another question I had is just to define an owner, because I know we mentioned LLC or corporation. So is that one, or is that all the members of said corporation or LLC?
Or the board, or.
Yeah. And that's only when something gets contentious, right? I mean, that's really where this plays out. I think 90% of the time, because it's also somebody gets to pick one of 3, right? So if there's a situation they can make work for them, they'll pick that route.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just that 10% of time.
Sounds like Missy's agreed to provide us a little primer on that might make some of these points clear, that we can circle back with you, and hopefully that'll help explain it more to.
Well, I think even the word double majority was somewhat helpful for me, realizing that was what the goal of some of these was to provide that double majority component.
And I guess the other thing is probably to consider if the city wants to be very generous with annexation petitions, it doesn't necessarily need to follow the statutory template. So the city could just say, if an owner of property wants to be, that is located within the UGB, wants to file a petition, that person can do that. So, I think probably what I want to do is get together with Scott and Jordan and think about if there's a way we can make this simpler that would meet the city's goals and less complicated with the double majority, and there's even a triple majority and all of that. So what I'm hearing is this is too confusing and it needs to be streamlined.
Yes.
Yes, for me anyway.
And I think we can do that. I need to verify this, but my recollection is that the city has a lot of latitude in who it wants to be able to annex without holding without having an election, based on that 2016 law that led to the Corvallis case.
Well, just for your information, we've been working on this for 7 years or whatever, and yeah, we'd love some housing here pretty soon. So that's,
Yeah, right.
that's what we're doing here.
So make it as easy as possible.
I mean, at least as clear as possible. Thank you.
Any final questions on that before we move to the next section? But I think we got some direction to provide some more work on this one a little bit. Point well taken. This just addresses submittal requirements that we would require for a annexation to be able to adequately review it. Legal description of the property, the consent, statement of consent by the property owners that we were just talking about. Burden of proof, addressing how they address the approval criteria is an important component that we would need. How it addresses the area plan, things of that nature. Some municipalities require documentation from a school district documenting that the applicant has had a conversation with the school district to understand what the needs are. Hopefully with the area plan process, we will have the ability to maybe identify generally where it makes most sense to have a school and apply a public facility / institutional designation to it, so that it's clear kind of the general area of where it might go. And a signed annexation agreement. And number 8, this is key. Ideally, in a UGB amendment type of situation where we would have the time to do the area planning process, and then also update our transportation system plan, water, wastewater, master plans, park plans, because those plans don't contemplate this expansion currently, because when we adopted those most recently, we didn't know where those expansion areas were going to be. We knew that with parks, when water, wastewater, and I think with the most recent TSP, we knew the population projections, so we knew what the demands were. We just didn't know where they were going to occur. So those plans need to be updated to make sure that what identify capital facility needs that need to be put into place to help support and accommodate the development. If a developer comes in and wants to petition the city to do development before we've done that, then this says that the applicant can initiate that, basically that process, and probably help fund it too. Basically, this says if you're out ahead of the city on this, it doesn't mean you can't go forward, but you're going to need to initiate some of those amendments to those plans. So there's that. Confirmation discussion with any irrigation district for water rights or other irrigation district facilities. I'll show you a map of the nearest irrigation district to this area. It doesn't, an existing irrigation district doesn't really encumber our UGB area, maybe a little bit. I think it kind of cuts off at 126, but I'll show you that. And I'll talk a little bit more about water rights here in a second. So this still needs some massaging, but these gives you a sample, a flavor of what we would ask for in the submittal for annexation. Basically everything we need, any approval criteria we create, we need to have submittal requirements that help demonstrate compliance with that.
I have a question. Right at the top, it says the application must include the following materials with their annexation request, and then it says unless waived by the city. What does that mean? And can you please explain, are we going to create criteria for waiving it, or is this where the single lots that just want to come in fit in? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Well, if we want to create an exemption, I think for those smaller lots to not have to, I guess, master plan at the time, that seems like it would be in a different section.
Yeah.
This is just more for those that are applying. If there's something, like say this number 6 made it into the final thing. If it was obvious that they weren't going to have a school on their site because it was nowhere near where the school site is, do they really need to go talk to the school?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Okay. So back to the waived by the city portion, it seems like a catch-all, and we like to have parameters, and I'd like to, you don't have to tell me now even, why is that phrase in there, and what does it really mean, and why it has to be done?
It reads like you can waive all of them.
That's what
Yeah.
I was thinking too. When I read it, it was like, okay, you go somewhere else and we hire a new planner, and that new planner doesn't believe in any of this stuff, and the next thing you know, all these things are coming in, and they've had all the criteria waived that are important to us. I know that's not really what you intend there, but it did read the same way to me.
Okay, that's good. So it sounds too permissive.
Yes.
Is that
It's
the
very
issue?
permissive.
Okay.
And again, I know that there are reasons we do it. I just don't know why it's here and what it applies to.
It's something that we have in other parts of our development code. It's just basically acknowledging that not all situations are created equally, that there are exceptions to rules sometimes.
I mean, I trust your work, but are you the
Yeah.
person that's providing the waiver, and, do you need wiggle room? We understand that, but we'd kind of like to know what the parameters are, at least some parameters. I don't know what.
Okay.
I guess what I'm,
It's not applicable to whatever, but
yeah, I guess what I'm hearing is that, like, 1 or 2 of these might be, and so maybe it's just some verbiage that needs to be a little more direct.
Yeah,
But
the idea is that there may be like one or two here that might not be applicable, not,
It could be a
not all of
period, and
them.
it could be a sentence, that certain components may be waived should they not be applicable to the property. But something along that line, but I read the same thing when I went, wait a minute,
Okay.
I'd like all the waivers, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like 100% waivers, $1,000 on waivers. Okay,
Thank you.
good point, thank you. So moving on to the approval criteria, what will we judge these requests by? And so I think we want to be as specific as possible. Missy has provided some good advice about the need to be clear and objective, especially when it comes to housing development. Our criteria needs to be as clear and objective as possible for it to be lawful. So consider that as we go through these. That's why some of them, have to be a little bit more specific than others. But just running through the criteria, the draft criteria, obviously the land has to be eligible. That gets back to being in the UGB and contiguous. The proposal must be consistent with the applicable Sisters Comprehensive Plan policies and plan designations in the improved area plan. That's especially the area plan, the area plan is considered a component of our comprehensive plan. When we adopt it, it's a comprehensive plan amendment. So it is it's approved through the comprehensive plan by reference. So we want to make sure that the proposal is in conformance with the area plan.
back to that for 1 second. Number 2, it just says less exempt under SDC 410.300. Do we want to say subsection 3 or something which really refers to the specific instances?
Sorry, say that again.
Well, when I went back to 300, the things that we're saying that are exempt are those 3 items, A, B, and C.
Oh.
Underneath that,
More specific to that?
do we need to be more specific and then reference the subsection?
Gotcha. We can do that, yeah.
It took me a while to figure out SDC was not referring to collecting money, but to the Sisters Development.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Moving along, we want to make sure that the annexed territory is capable of being served by public facilities and services with adequate capacity as determined by the city, and that pertains to, is there the ability to serve this property with sanitary sewer? Do we have enough water to serve the site? Is it feasible to get the water to the site? So that could involve the potentially of requesting water rights from the property owner, as we'll discuss a little bit farther. Stormwater, what they do with their drainage on their site, how do they handle it? Obviously, the transportation and the impacts that it has to the community have to be identified with adequate capacity. And then the schools and parks. And the little asterisk denotes that we're using our adopted public facility plans as the measurement of how well they are capable of providing adequate capacity for those services.
Is this a good place to mention fire in that? I mean, I know that could fall under transportation to make sure, fire apparatus can fit in a neighborhood or turn around. Not that we have to build everything, like freeway-wide streets or anything like that, but just being mindful of that. And also, I think just access to, to water and hydrants, I think is probably the top 2 things they're probably concerned about.
We've talked about, and it's probably fine, but we have talked about, the school district property. Do we need to have a discussion with the fire district to see if they have a wish for some property to be set aside for a satellite station in that area? I don't know. We're not a big city, but, response time.
Yeah, we generally talk to, it's been a while, on that one, but we talked to Public Works considerably to find out if they needed any more land for Public Works facilities. We talked to the school district, and that's where we learned about the 15 acres. Public Works kind of decided that they had enough land as it was, or if they do, it's small pieces of a subdivision that they can get. I don't know if they specifically talked to the fire district or not, but I know we had that joint meeting with them where we brought it up, and it's probably worth circling back with them on.
I just think in the interest of nothing else, of maintaining discussion and continuity between the different entities within the city, to bring it back up one more time as we're putting this document together, to determine that they're fine, or be able to verify in here that we're going to set some land aside for that purpose in the master planning process.
Yeah,
You know, it may seem simple and not terribly worrisome, but I think that we've done a good job of mashing down a few silos, and I think that's another step you take when you're doing that.
no, I totally agree. I don't know, I feel like,
Well, when we talked to Chief Pryor yesterday, we
yesterday.
just happened to have a meeting with him, and he did mention the UGB expansion, and, you know, he doesn't have an answer, but that is a question in his mind of, maybe we do want something out in that direction, but so yeah, I don't know if it's too prescriptive, or if this is a good place to put.
We could just
That in there.
designate a chunk of PL and maybe the new city hall.
Yeah, as long as the needs aren't way bigger than we had accounted for, because we're requesting a certain amount of acreage that takes into account all the needs we have. As long as they don't need 15 acres for,
Right.
you know, if it's an acre or two,
Yeah,
or,
they're
you know,
usually
like,
pretty small.
I think that could be accommodated.
Satellite, because the primary station down
Yeah.
there, we'd be looking at a barn and stationing.
And our, our insurance grading for a community is impacted by response times and
Yep.
distance between stations, and so,
Just
you know,
thinking-
that would behoove us to keep our insurance rates, do
wasn't
everything we
on the
can to
list.
keep them as low as possible.
and I'm going to bring this up knowing, and we have someone with us here today who's talked to a few counselors and is going to finish talking to the rest of the counselors. And then I think she's also met with Scott. Kathy Russell brought something to me the other day, and again, she's bringing it to everybody. And she was talking about IBHS has some community standards, which I have not had a chance to read up on, but it might be worth us going and looking at those and seeing how they're written, you know, and how do you bring them into this kind of process, and which documents they belong in. I mean, I do have it on my to-do list, it's just I haven't had time to do that yet. Anyway, I'm very interested. It feels like those are the standards that, you know, we leaned on when we did our defensible space code, and they seem to be a leader in the industry, and I'd certainly like to see what they have to say. So,
Yeah, I'd like to consider that as well, because it's not something that we've fully considered by any means, but we should at least consider it and see if it has some merit within these annexation policies. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just a question of, should it be here, or should
Yeah.
it be later? in the
Yeah.
master
We'll be
plan,
looking to
guess.
you, Scott, to.
I think it's a good discussion for the area plan, where we can talk about, you know, if there's a need for an extra setback from the very edge of the UGB for a fire break, or, you know, layout of roads, you know, where more road connections, and
Even layout of roads to create the fire break.
exactly, and then policy statements saying, you know, if this is stuff that would be eventually implemented in the code, here's process code amendments to implement standards for community wildfire per, kind of that kind of stuff. So I think that's the perfect place to do it, in my opinion.
And do we need to put anything in any of these annexation policies to harken back to our new fire hardening and those space requirements?
I don't think so, because
is
they're in
that
their
just-
code. When they come in, they're subject to our development code.
Okay, so we don't have to specially
No.
point to it,
No, I don't think so.
although maybe a little check thing on a form somewhere wouldn't hurt, you know what I'm saying? Just to say, we acknowledge that, because the reason I ask this is, obviously, we're in a place that has a lot of fires, and we're doing as much as we can to highlight that and prevent it. So it doesn't hurt to have a little checkbox and say, we acknowledge this as part of our fire code, because I think it's that important, to be honest.
Well, does it even fall underneath the concept, again, of that area master plan or the master plan that the developer submits, has something in the documentation that goes to the developer that says the city may at its discretion require fire breaks, et cetera, within this type of a development? I mean, I don't know how you would word it, but there may need to be something that lets people know up front when they're looking to develop that there may be requirements that come into play, and what those requirements might be, so they can plan around them. I don't think anybody likes surprises. No one wants to spend the money on developing something and submitting it and have us say, well, no. That we get a fire break there. You're gonna have a fire break there. So I think we need to think about how we do that. I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
But I think in fairness to the developers and the citizens and everybody else who's involved, we make it very clear that this is going to be something that's an overlayment on anything that we do.
Yeah, the more references we can make in more documents, the better. But I think there's a way to address that. And the backstop is the development code, really.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm assuming that the property owners that are submitting this application get assistance from staff to answer these questions? I mean, you work together and,
Sure. I mean, we have pre-application meetings with them to go over things. I think somebody made the point that at this point, oftentimes they're pretty sophisticated. Oftentimes, big developers. More often than not, they're bigger developers who've done a lot of work, who have a whole host of consultants and probably an attorney on hand to address these things adequately. But if it's somebody, even they sometimes need assistance on some things. But if it was somebody that didn't have that kind of help, we would still be here to help kind of interpret this stuff. Okay. So this one just talks about if once you've shown for infrastructure your impacts, how are you going to mitigate those related to water, sewer, stormwater, transportation, and that's
Number 4?
what's that?
Number 4 you're talking about?
Yeah, specific mitigation shall be specified in an annexation agreement or other funding mechanism approved by the city council prior to annexation. So those types of things will be identified by their project engineer, and our public works department and our city engineer will review them and will identify any impacts and what the proper mitigation is.
I have a totally off-topic question, I'm sorry. When land is annexed in, does that change the value of the land for tax purposes? I mean, obviously they will not be paying city taxes, but does that get reevaluated at the county level?
it didn't change property owner necessarily, right?
It will change because they'll be in a different tax code area.
Yep.
So they'll pay city assessors.
Right.
And then not pay the enhanced sheriff, et cetera. But in terms of valuation, it's a question, they're not making any changes to the improvements on the property. So there wouldn't be anything that would trigger a reassessment,
Okay.
I don't believe. I don't know about the land value, if that changes because of the potential for more dense development, et
Yeah, I
cetera.
was just wondering if it triggered a reassessment, so.
I don't
County
think by
level, but-
itself, because they assess city of Citrus properties as well, so.
Right.
Until it's
Yeah.
platted.
Let's double check with the county assessor's office.
All right, sorry, thank you, go ahead.
No, that's all right. So this 5, 6, and maybe 5 continues on, but these next couple relate to transfer of irrigation district water rights. This language is basically brought in from another community, so it's sort of verbatim from that community. It needs to be updated and addressed. I'll just jump ahead a little bit here. There's a map up there on the screen. The one on the left is the irrigation districts, the green cross hatching. is the Three Sisters Irrigation District. And on the right, doesn't line up nice and neatly, but is the urban growth boundary expansion area. It's hard to tell where the boundary is of that, but my hunch is that outside of the city, it ends probably at maybe 126. Those are obviously irrigated lands to the south. Our UGB boundary stops at just north of 126. So it's, assuming I'm reading that right, it's possible that we don't have any lands in our urban growth boundary that are in an established irrigation district. However, despite that, comments that I've received from Public Works are that it doesn't matter if you're in an irrigation district or not, if you have water rights or not. The city will request that those water rights be transferred to the city as a means to help to provide capacity to serve that property with city services. So if they have them, transfer them. If they don't, then they can go buy some and transfer them, or pay a fee in lieu. I just throw that out there. There's no legal review on this one yet. I think it's a pretty standard practice in other communities, but something we've talked about getting some water right attorneys or water right consultants that specialize in this to help kind of advise us on some of this. But that's the thinking behind it, is that, water rights, so that helps the city provide water to in turn serve that development in the future.
It'd be nice to know from some of the landowners out there that if they have water rights, if that's a detriment, because I have no idea.
And this is something that's not on like our fee schedule currently. Okay.
To them as a landowner, I mean, you might have someone that wants to do everything that you're talking about, but they don't want to get rid of the water rights. I don't know. I just don't know the answer, so that's why I'm asking.
Well, I mean, so the city will have an interest in those, right, for the reasons Scott mentioned.
No, I
It could
know.
even be
I
for
understand.
mitigation credits, right? There could be cases where the landowner owns other land, wants to transfer them, and then we have an issue where we're saying, no, actually, you need to give those or pay a fee in lieu of the value of those rights so we can go and acquire other rights.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's so that we can drop another well or do whatever we need to do potentially to accommodate additional water usage.
Yeah.
Or by rights.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that a lengthy process to get water rights? Oh,
It's slow,
And it's difficult.
but I think if they're agreeing to do so, you don't wait for you don't actually wait for it. I've heard
Yeah.
it takes years. So. Good question, though.
So there's some other criterion here in terms of the timing of the transfer. This one says transfer shall occur prior to the recordation of final plat for a land division or prior to CO for development subject to a site plan review, whichever occurs first.
That might be a hang-up.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I guess we'll have to have more discussion in terms of what the proper timing is for that. That's where it gets a little more technical. I have to get some more feedback. I assume if we wait till the final plat, then we're not relying on that water to serve that development. It's to help serve some future development because, if you need that water to serve that development, you probably need the water rights before, I would assume, before final plat. But point I think is that I wanted to share the concept with you of the water rights, but I think these provisions, this language here needs a little more work. I'll get kind of the recommendations from the engineers in terms of when the best timing is to get those water rights transferred. And then going on to the next one, it just talks about here's an exemption. If the council were to find that continued use of their water rights would not conflict with the expansion policies, then the owner may continue to use those irrigation district water rights. Again, we haven't had enough conversation to know if that's even applicable here. Maybe not because of not being in an irrigation district. So my recommendation is maybe we don't get too in the weeds on this one. Just just yet, but kind of talk more high level I want to make sure that the concept was something that was agreeable to the council, and then we can work on the details. This one just talks about coordination with the local irrigation district to make sure that the protections that are in place to their facilities that may continue in operation after an annexation. Again, I don't think a lot of that's going to be applicable because we don't have those irrigation districts here, at least in the expansion area. And then moving along, the proposal demonstrates that the approval of the annexation and zoning districts. How are we doing on time? I know we haven't gotten to housing yet.
Half an hour.
Maybe we just want to gloss over these and skip the housing because I know that's the crux of this, or one of the most important pieces. But this is language, just making sure that they evaluate their transportation impacts per the transportation planning rule, and that talk about how rights of way will be improved to urban standards. That's all pretty standard stuff. Okay, this probably could have taken a whole 2 hours to talk about affordable housing, but here we are. This section basically says unless you get a approval to do provide land in lieu of developing affordable housing, you're required to provide it. So it talks about for annexations involving land to be zoned or zoned to a residential district or commercial, employment, or industrial land shall meet the following affordable housing requirements.
Before you go any
Yeah.
a grant of land is made in lieu of, is that explain?
Yeah.
Is that like donating land to Habitat?
Yeah, there's a provision in there that if the developer doesn't want to build it, then they can deed the land to a Habitat or to the city to have them build the housing.
Because I'm not sure that the references all correspond. So
That's possible.
it has to be way down there, yeah.
We'll work on those references, yeah.
I just want to be sure that's what that was referring to.
It is, yeah.
So is it saying that commercial, employment, and industrial lands have to meet affordable housing requirements?
It's the way that's the way it reads right now. It's interesting that the affordable housing is basically generated off of the number of residential units you provide, and industrial and commercial don't typically provide residential units.
Yes.
So it begs the question, and that's something I wanted to bring up with the council, is do you just want to apply affordable housing requirements to the development that generates housing and therefore require it based on the number of housing units, a percentage? Or do we want the commercial and employment industrial lands to also, they probably can't build residential units because it may not be compatible with their development, but are there other tools that we can put into place to make sure that they're paying a portion of the affordable housing requirements that may be like a fee in lieu, or other communities, Redmond and Bend both have construction excise taxes that are applied to just commercial and industrial that go into affordable housing. So I just wanted to bring up that as a question to the council. What do you want to do? Do you want to just apply it to residential? Do you want to apply it to these other types of development? And if so, what tool do you want to use?
Go
I'm
ahead.
just going to say commercial can have mixed use. You can have housing and commercial, though, yeah, industrial usually not. So, bit of a gray area.
Scott and I had a discussion with Lynn McConnell from Housing Works the other day, and I had not really thought about the construction excise tax being used only in commercial and industrial. When I'd heard about it before, I'd kind of thought, oh, do we really want to put this on our residential, or make residential building harder? Because I mean, that's in my mind the last thing I would prefer to do. But I like the idea of doing that or figuring out if that's the right tool. I do feel like we need to be looking to everybody to contribute to that, to our affordable housing state of mind. And I see where it's not going to happen the same way. If there's other levers to pull, I'd love to hear about them. But I don't think we want to ask for hey, can we just have like 3 acres of yours and we'll just stick some houses in there? That doesn't seem appropriate. So open to options.
I think that I thought about this a little bit, and I like the idea of somehow, whether that's like they do in Bend and Redmond, on those lands. Face it, if we put in commercial and employment lands, they're impacting our housing stock. And we want to be sure we have housing for those commercial and employment lands. And we also want to be sure that if they're a high tech or an industry that's looking to hire, we want that workforce housing component as well. And so I think looking at mechanisms that do that would make some sense to me. And that would make me a lot more comfortable with the 25% number that's going to appear very shortly. I'd circled that because I was thinking, well, that's not going to be enough to handle some of these employment lands and other things. But perhaps if we do it, you might make me more comfortable with that 25% number. Otherwise, I'm going to fight you on it. So, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it until you said it, until you mentioned. I said, how could that work in mine? And then you mentioned that out. The concept of excise tax is always a difficult one for me because it's got the tax word in it. But I think we need to think about how are we going to ensure that we have the appropriate amount of housing for the employment lands.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for me is, and I work a lot in economic development, especially the last few years again, we just do have to be careful about overburdening businesses too. Yep. So I don't think businesses are against helping with affordable housing, but if you said 5% or something big, you would get a lot of pushback from possible businesses coming to town. So just have to keep that in mind as we're thinking about this, is putting, I mean, obviously, we want them to help us with the housing stock as well. And, if we, on those mixed-use buildings, let's say they're doing mixed use and there's 4 units, I don't think it hurts for them to have one of them be affordable housing. I don't think that hurts very much. So if they're doing that, if they're actually building housing in a zone where it's allowed, I think that they should probably follow the rules everybody else is, but at the same time, on industrial lands and some of those commercial lands where there's no mixed use, just be careful. We'll just have to think about it in a way that doesn't overburden business as well. So.
Yeah, I'm looking for something that's fair,
Yeah,
like
yes.
equitable to what's happening elsewhere. Not in my mind, not looking to say business needs to contribute more. Just making sure that we're.
Hey, Microsoft, come on in and pay for all the housing that we're doing.
Oh, well, okay. No, I'm kidding.
But, you mentioned both Redmond and Bend are doing something like that. Do you have a sense of what that percentage is?
Less than 5%. I
Yeah,
don't know what
yeah,
it is.
I know it's less than 5%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
don't.
did a big number to be a little provocative, but at the
Right.
same time,
No,
I mean, I do want to be clear that it is an actual tax, it's a fee or whatever you want to call it, so.
And that's just a construction fee? Is it like a one-time?
It's payable at building permit. I think it's like just a percentage of the value, I think, of the development, the construction value.
Where's that money go?
Well, City of Bend, I think, goes to their affordable housing fund to help leverage other projects. And we also learned that didn't she say that they use it for services as well, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't heard about that. Services for housing.
Organizations like Thrive, who help direct people, and I mean maybe Neighbor Impact. I mean organizations that are have a service that helps for housing, kind of thing.
I think that as we look at how we were able to leverage that small amount of money we have with the help of the county to get Trinity Place coming up out of the ground, it seems to me that something that if we did something like this, it would go 100% to me into that housing stock pool of money to help offset some of the other costs we're going to ask other people to do in this 25% component. So it seems reasonable, but I also understand what you're saying too. We're competing in market with other communities and areas, and we can't price ourselves out of that market without
the state's already in a bad shape, so I'm always just going to be sensitive about it and just make sure we're clear-headed, right?
I think it's worth exploring.
Yeah. I think we could probably do with just a tiny bit of homework. What has Ben doing? What has Renman doing? And if you want us to do that, that's okay. We can do that.
We had a workshop several months ago
Did we?
about different affordable housing options
did.
for funding it, and the CET
think
was
you have the-
brought up as a promising thing to explore further. And I believe it, if not all, but a certain percentage of a CET has to be used for affordable housing at this point. I think the state kind of preempted that. So.
I mean, obviously, we'll have some discretion, right? So that's the policy.
I would only be
makers.
comfortable with it if it went to that specifically. Regardless of what the state says, but.
Yeah.
I guess one question that just comes up in my mind, if we take money instead of, or if it's money instead of units being built, you need land to build units, and where does that money go? Like you had mentioned, maybe it helps offset some of the costs for the people that are building it, but we don't have a whole lot of land. You know, if we got money, we don't have land to build. We were lucky to find the NHA land the way we did, but it's just one thing to keep in mind, as a fee in lieu versus requiring to build the units. If we get the money, then the burden is on us to build the units or to find somebody to build the units. But there are certainly scenarios where a fee in lieu might make sense.
We have partners, right, that we've already worked with, so I'm sure that opportunities will come.
Yeah.
Scott, were you talking about you still talking about the construction excise tax as opposed to the fee in lieu of in the residential? I just want to make sure.
I was kind of lumping both of them
Okay.
together. Like, if we get a pot of money for housing, that's just a pot of money. If you don't have land or, that's feasible to build on it, what good is it, I guess? It's just a consideration in terms of, just a consideration, I guess.
There's an opportunity, we could buy land using that kind of money and then provide
Yeah.
space for another entity like we've worked with in the past.
Well, go ahead.
Well, a CET would apply citywide for, vacant lands within the current city limits, but then the fee in lieu conversation would be, you're proposing to annex, it's going to be commercial and industrial zoning, but for the very reasons you're talking about, you're generating the need for more workforce housing and things like that. That also goes into that pot for acquisition of future land for affordable housing or subsidizing affordable housing in other parts of the UGB.
Yeah.
I thought the CET only applied to,
It's any new development. No, I mean, it could be a policy discussion, but I think typically it applies to any new development anywhere, whether it's in the new
Kind of hard to
annexed
only do it
territories
in
or
one
not.
section and not in the other, I would think.
I thought it was just part of the annexation. Sorry,
No,
that's what I was thinking.
So, part of our conversation, again, the other day with Lynn McConnell, did bring that up. The more we talk about it, the more we learn, right? 'Cause you have conversations where it brings up different ideas. And are we at number 9?
We're still at 9, yeah.
Okay, so we're not at 9. So the grant of land in lieu, we were talking about that. And, Scott mentioned, a fee in lieu gets us nothing. I mean, it gets us a pot of money, and maybe in some very small circumstances, we would want to consider that, in my mind. If it was a small landowner and like the way the lots were laid out, I mean, there might be something different, but we need land. So I would like to be very careful about changing that land in lieu to a fee in lieu. I mean, I think we need to be, that's part of our problem is lack of land.
I mean, and to get back to that first section of 9, I mean, do we want to keep it saying residential, commercial, or employment or industrial, or do we want to drop off something like industrial? I mean, I don't.
I'd leave it the way it is for now until we get more information.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it doesn't make sense within the context of the rest of the
Right.
ordinance, but
Well,
I think-
we're adding a CET, that can be added below, and then it would apply to all.
yeah, this will get revamped. I think it's okay to keep it in there now, knowing that maybe you guys want to explore potential options for commercial and employment lands. It doesn't make sense right there to me, because this applies to providing units based on the number of residential units you provide, which
Yeah.
they're not providing. So I just wanted to kind of go and just kind of talk about the 25%. So say it is a residential development. The way this reads is that 25% of the residential units to be developed must be compliant with subsection 9. So basically, this is just straight out of the Ashland ordinance in terms of these calculations here. And I just threw at the bottom of there an example to kind of help illustrate this. So say it's a development with 100 free market units, free market, not affordable units. That would require 25 units at the 25%. That's all pretty straightforward. But how many units you actually provide kind of depends on what level of affordability that you're trying to hit with your units. This one gives a credit if you're going to try to hit on the lower end of the AMI spectrum, 80% or less, then you get a multiplier, so you only have to provide 20 units. If you're going to do between 81 and 100%, then it's 25 units. That's kind of in the middle. If you're choosing to hit the higher end of the market, the workforce, pretty much the workforce section, you'd have to build more units, because the thinking is that, if it's a for sale unit or a rental, they can rent them for hire. Maybe for the community that kind of showed what their priority was. They wanted to emphasize or prioritize units that met the lower end of the spectrum. So that helped to me kind of illustrate what the impact of this section has on here.
Well, we talked a little bit about this the other day, and I appreciate the table at the bottom. The one thing it says to me when I look at that is it disincentivizes making workforce housing. That this kind of a proposal, if I'm a looking developer and I want to utilize the land in the way that makes the most profit for me and is the best for my company, and all those reasons, I have no problem with that. That's what we do. And I can build 20 units and I meet my requirement, we're going to have an awful lot of 80% and under AMI housing in my mind, because we have no way of controlling that. And one of my big goals, and one of the reasons I pushed very hard for the MMV property, was the number of workforce housing units that were going to be accommodated in there. So I think we need to look at this tweak to ensure that we don't inadvertently create an area of our community that is high-end homes and affordable homes and nothing else. And I don't like the ratios because they disincentivize requiring workforce housing. Don't know how to fix it, but I'm going to tell you right now, I don't
Well, we
like
could
it.
just lower it to 20% and not have anything. Have no qualifiers.
Yeah.
I mean, 25 is ambitious, I think. 30% is unattainable, and 20%, maybe that's not enough. So I think 25% is pretty good, and I think you have to do the qualifiers, because if you didn't, it would be the same thing. If they would all still do the cheap ones and you'd have 25 cheaper ones.
Well, that's what that says right there.
Yeah, so I think that the one thing we should do is give the development world a little bit of credit. I think that the people that we've heard about coming in possibly would be able to follow this from what we've kind of heard, and I don't think they're going to all do the inexpensive ones. Now, there may be other developments that we haven't heard from that might not be able to. Maybe they would do what you were kind of saying, but I think we have to give options.
I don't disagree with you in that sense, but my goal here is to ensure a mix of housing and to not shoot ourselves in the foot on the workforce housing. We've heard so many times from the school district, we want to bring in doctors and nurses. We have trouble getting, we're having a lot of problem getting in people because there is no affordable housing for people that earn that wage at the 120 AMI level. And as long as we do that, we can build all the employment land we want, and it'll be half vacant. And I am really seriously concerned that these ratios punish anybody who wishes to do workforce housing. It's not that I'm not in favor of affordable housing. I'm very much in favor of it. It'll help us with our situation with people in the woods around here and everything. But the reality is that that kind of a hop is too big for me. And I think we need to tweak the ratios. And we're not Ashland. We're a different community. And we have a different set of needs and issues. And I'm very, very uncomfortable with this the way that it looks. And as it looks right now, I could not vote to approve it. I just one vote. Couldn't live with that.
Gary, just clarifying.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we look at the 1, 2, 3 under there, are you looking at, I'm making this up, but changing the 0.75 to like just a different number so that, I mean, it does feel like I like having the different things. So if you're talking about adjusting just the like 0.75, 1.0, and 1.25, if that's what you're uncomfortable with, I would love to see some other options. Is that the piece?
I think that we either have to figure out a way to require a ratio, a mix,
Okay.
no more
Okay.
than,
Okay.
or something along that line, in order to ensure that we get to the workforce housing. So I think the jump from 20 to 25 is not significant, but the jump from 20 to 33 is. And, this has nothing to do with, I'm not talking about the quality of the builders or what they want to do or anything like that.
Yep.
This is a 20-year plan. I keep hearing that from you guys. This is a 20-year plan. When I say, what about, well, remember, it's 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, who's going to be doing this work in 20 years? Whatever we decide is what's going to happen in the future. And I am not comfortable with those numbers the way they look. I don't have an answer. I wish I did. But I'm just not comfortable with them. Do we try to apply a percentage that says, this is the way it works, however, it has to be a ratio?
25, 25, 50, or whatever.
Yeah. Then I'm comfortable with it. But, and I'm not, I'm very comfortable with who's doing the development work that we currently know of in this area. They do good work. I haven't got a problem with that. But who knows who that next person's going to be or that next person's going to be. And we could see somebody come in and say, all right, man, I got it made. 80% of my houses are market rate and 20% of my houses are lower income.
Do we have an idea what the percentages that we need? I mean, do we have studies on that?
That was the question. I wanted, how do we know what's the right number?
Yeah.
And are there any state statutes that require a minimum? I mean, could we make this 0? Could we make it 100? Those are questions I had. And then I thought that it really should say a minimum of 25%, the very first sentence, because you end up getting 33 units required for the workforce housing, and that's more than 25%. Does that make sense? So yeah, I think it sounds like we need to have some more discussion around what is the right number and how do we go about with these ratios.
I was thinking that, yeah.
I think we do, yeah.
This will be a whole work session
But
right here.
When I listen to our partners, whether it's and looking at who we haven't been able to bring into our community, who they've lost coming into our community because there wasn't that last digit down there. It concerns me. Now, I have no idea how much we need, but right now, as I see it, I'd have trouble proving that.
We haven't had a lot of success in finding examples of having, affordable housing policies in their annexation policies. I'm wondering, not to make it even more confusing, but having a mix of affordable and workforce. So requirement for a certain percentage has to be affordable, and then a certain percentage has to be, workforce, and make that consistent with what our housing needs.
And then you could apply whatever matrix you want to it, but.
Yeah,
I would
10%,
think that's kind of
25%.
in the back of my mind was some kind of a percentage to ensure a mix. Not that I'm adverse to, and I also believe very strongly that when you have a mix of income levels in a neighborhood, you have a more diverse neighborhood. And I think you don't get that monoculture like we have in some parts of town, including the one that I live in.
That's at Larch Commons. The Habitat's new community has a mix of affordable and workforce in the same,
Yep.
all in the same cottage development. So
It's a very different.
there's,
If we're going to forge our own path, I'm okay with that.
yeah.
I'm just a little concerned in that, I mean, these are all great points. I'm just trying to, again, apply it to all these different scenarios. And if somebody had like a relatively small parcel, it's really limiting what they can do. Or if somebody wants to build, and it goes into the question around disbursement, is that, okay, if somebody wants to build a condo complex, right? Like, well, they're all going to be together,
Can't
unplug
break
them
a
like
condo.
Legos, right? And spread around a neighborhood, right? So again, being not too prescriptive, because I think that there's some options that would headwinds with some of this way it's written.
It highlights some of the challenges of being clear and objective related to housing. So I think I was talking about it with our planning consultants this morning, is some communities, the way they deal with that is they have to have pretty objective standards, and that oftentimes means prescriptive, right? You have to be clear what you want, but it doesn't always work. So you could have a kind of a clear and objective path, and if somebody doesn't want to follow that, they can elect to go into more of a subjective path that say they have a different idea of how to disperse than what we might say is, okay, 1 out of every 3 lots has to be, this, or 1 out of every 10 lots has to be affordable. It doesn't work for them. They can come up with something different, but they basically choose to go down that path. We have to set up a path that's clear and objective, but we can also set up a discretionary path if the applicant chooses to want to not do that and want to do something different. Still the same, meets the same goals, but it's a different way of getting there.
Just so long as we don't get into clustering.
One, can I just interject? What an interesting discussion. I appreciate even just being here to witness it. So one thing that would be worth considering is that this concept that is all the buzz now and talked about and implemented in large cities of middle housing, and a lot of places call it the missing middle housing, is supposed to be a proxy for this category of workforce housing that you all have been discussing. And I wonder if it's worth including in your future conversation where opting into the middle housing requirements that are in statutes now for larger cities could kind of fill that gap, so that perhaps your affordable housing requirements could catch the 80% or below, but the market might itself take care of workforce housing through allowance of missing middle housing. I don't know if that's been part of the discussion up to this point. Middle housing is like allowing duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage clusters on, any lot zone residential, essentially. So
And
that's kind of
we
a
have
wrench in this a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have done some of that in our community with deficiency measures that many of you all worked on, where we did open up our zone districts to more housing types to help facilitate that. And we're actually getting some infill development that's implementing. It's
Right.
been nice to see. So that
It
is
is
an option. I
proving
guess
to
the
be
question is,
a market-based solution to the lack of that 120 or below housing that is subject of this discussion.
And I think we need to be careful too in that, this is a 20-year plan, right? And economies change and incentives change. I mean, right now we're in a world where we know that if you're below that 80%, there's more funding available for those projects. And that's now why we, to your point, right? It's harder to build that missing middle. But maybe in 5 years that shifts, maybe there's, so it's really trying to be as mindful as possible. The economy can slump and everybody's building affordable housing because that's the new price point, So yeah, we don't have a crystal ball, but just want to be as flexible as possible, knowing the economy and incentives can change over time.
And I think that, again, comes back, I agree with you. And that's why, if we can look at percentages or something, I'm okay with that. And that one of the reasons that the 120 has troubled me is exactly what you mentioned, is that there are funding opportunities from the federal government and other entities for some of the other types of housing that are there, which makes it even more incentive for a developer who's watching their pennies, which some may have to do, again, construction costs and everything else, to really kind of lean into that if we don't have some kind of a mix of percentage that's required within the code. And I don't know how you do it. Heck, if I did, I'd write it and put it on the wall and say, what do you think? You'd all laugh at me, but that's okay. I'd cry.
And we're at 3:00 right now, so I don't know what we want to,
Or 4 if that.
yeah, I know, we're at 3:30 o'clock.
Hey,
For that clock.
I honestly think it would be of benefit to, if we have 3 categories up there, if we can make it 2 categories, it's simpler, and maybe there's a way to do that.
Might be.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, it's up to you guys if you want to stop there. That's fine.
I feel like
Well,
this
for
is
some
going to take
things that-
some pondering.
Sorry, go ahead.
I feel like this is going to take some pondering.
Yeah.
Like it's like not immediately solvable.
True. And maybe a workshop primarily focused on housing is the next.
I really think so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I was hoping we would do more today. I haven't got a problem, but what we've done so far is great, because it kind of opened my eyes up to a lot of things. But I think we need to just really sit down and have a real hard talk on this, and maybe it's incumbent upon us to look at the middle housing concept, to look at some of these other things that are out there, look at how other, I know we kind of pulled the Ashland language because we said, let's do that. But now that I see the numbers kind of up there, and that was very helpful, so thank you for doing it, it raised concerns for me.
Hey, Missy, thank you for using the word market rate, because I'm a firm believer that markets in general lead us. Governments kind of don't, because
Yeah, I wish,
that's where the money's coming from. And if it's a market-based idea, I already
Yeah.
kind of like it.
and there are, middle housing is required in cities over 10,000 right now. And so there's starting to be some pretty good data about whether the concept of letting the market, take a shot at this is working. So I do think it's worth considering that piece, because I definitely understand the concerns that this could work in a counterintuitive way to build less of what the city actually needs and more of what the city already will have enough of.
And just one more question to follow that up on the middle housing, is some of that being done on deed restricted land so that that stays in that particular category when someone moves out, whether it's a condo in this half ownership or split home or something along that line? So have you seen anything on that?
No. So the middle housing is really it's truly market-based housing. So it's not, the concept of middle housing is just more density on, you have a 5,000 square foot lot, and where you used to be able to build a single family dwelling on it, you might be able to build up to a triplex. You might go up and you might go cover the lot. And so you are then able to sell 3 units where you would have only sold 1 unit. And the price of those units is much less than your one single family dwelling. But it's not deed restricted, and it's not income regulated or anything like that. It just caters to a class of buyers that doesn't have, $300,000 to put down for a down payment. So it really is truly letting the market drive it.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I think we gave you enough to work on for sure. And do we want to just kind of do a part 2 to this at some point, or do you want us to send us our questions, or just wait until we get to that?
We always welcome your questions if you have them in between. I think there's a joint workshop with the Planning Commission on May 7th, and then I think we have a placeholder for bringing this back for workshop in May as well. the later meeting in May.
We might need it.
Yeah,
Perhaps,
so
do you think another special meeting might be in order just to?
I want to just make a statement here. We're having that joint meeting with the Planning Commission, and I think we have to be really careful during that meeting to make sure they get their ideas heard, because we're very used to kind of jumping in, and I feel like that it's a chance for us to hear from them as opposed to be prescriptive to them. And so I just want to encourage us to go into that meeting thinking, like, what do they have to offer, as opposed to let's all hash it all out right now. So that's just my own thoughts. I think the last time we met, it might have been a little overwhelming to them, so.
I personally would prefer when we have this meeting that we not get into some of the areas we haven't gotten into yet ourselves, because I'd like to have that discussion within this group, and then sit down and have that within the bigger group. So we don't have what you just mentioned happen.
Okay. Anything else for the moment? All right, well,
Thanks.
progress.
Thanks a lot.
Great.
It's good
Thank you.
discussion.
Nice to see you all.
Yeah, good to see you, Missy. Thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate you being here.
I'm gonna adjourn the meeting.
We'll adjourn the building.